Hello, welcome to a short video about source evaluation with a focus on origin and specifically sources for historical research and historical study. This could apply to fields like science or other fields, but I'm focusing on history and evaluating the origin of a source. So first, when we're evaluating a source, we have a couple of key definitions. These should be reviewed. First, values. These are what's valuable, what's useful, the pros of a source, the strengths. I like to think of it, what are the benefits of studying this source to learn about history? What was beneficial about it? The next word we have is the limitations. What's missing? What are the downsides, the cons, the disadvantages? Yeah? We might ask ourselves, what are the disadvantages of using this source to learn about history? That does not mean this source is unreliable or biased or should be ignored. We really shouldn't be reading any source that has misinformation. So we've already determined that this source has correct information, but we have to consider the pros and cons, the benefits and the disadvantages. So we're going to focus on origin because there's lots of things that when we evaluate a source, we could evaluate many things. We could evaluate the content and the purpose, but we're going to focus on origin. Origin, by which I mean where something comes from. Where did it come from? So there are two key questions. Well, three really. Who wrote it? When was it written? And is, as a result of those two pieces of information, determine, is it a primary source or a secondary source? Okay, so we can take notes on a source with these questions. Origin details, who wrote it, when was it written, primary or secondary? Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of sources and let's determine who wrote it, when it was written, primary or secondary, and then we're going to talk about values and limitations. So let's look at our first source. Our first source is Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica. We're learning about the Transatlantic Slave Trade, okay? And here we have some information. Remember, our questions are, who wrote it, when was it written, and is it primary or secondary? So, who wrote it? Someone named Thomas Lewis, and it was fact-checked by the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica, and it was last updated on December 20th, 2022. So let's click a little bit more about Thomas Lewis. He is a contributor to Sage Publications' Encyclopedia of African American Society, whose work for that encyclopedia formed the basis of his contributions to Britannica. So this is a person, I don't know much about his background, but he did contribute to an encyclopedia of African American Society that was then used by Encyclopedia Britannica. So we have a couple authors here. We have Thomas Lewis, but then also another source, another origin is Encyclopedia Britannica. So, and it was I wanted to look at the article history. It was first published in 2015, and it has been revised, little things added, links added, article revised and expanded in 2021. We could even click on these individual people. Let me look at the most recent one. He's a manager of geography and history. He has worked as an editor at Encyclopedia Britannica since 1992. Okay, all right, let's go back. So I'm going to ask myself, what are the benefits of this source's origin? What are the limitations of this source's origin? Okay, benefits. When was it written? It was written, the first one is 2015, not that long ago, but it's been updated continuously over the years since then. So it is recent. That's a value. Yeah, it's recent. It is, one of its sources is Encyclopedia Britannica, which is a respected website encyclopedia with a long history. This article was originally written, by Thomas Lewis, who has contributed to another encyclopedia that focuses on my topic, which is the history of the African diaspora in the United States. That's good. So my author has contributed to another encyclopedia focusing on my topic. Very good. Limitations of this origin. I don't know much about who Thomas Lewis is or what his expertise is. Is he a college professor? Is he a historian? Does he have degrees in history? I'd like to know more. I don't know a ton there. But I think another benefit, another value is that it was fact checked. So it was written by someone who wrote specifically on this topic, and then it was checked, and it has been continually updated. Lots of values here. Now, we have to read the article to also read for the values and limitations. Well, I can ask myself, is this a primary source or a secondary source? Well, it was written in 2022, and a lot of the topics, as we can see from just scrolling down, are from the 16th to the 19th century. That's the 1500s to the 1800s. So if it was written in 2022, could it be a primary source? No, it cannot, because nobody writing in 2022 was alive in the 1800s. So we know this is a secondary source. All right, values and limitations of a secondary source. Secondary sources incorporate a wide array of information from many different sources, covering different time periods, different geographic locations. They offer a large picture. That is a value of secondary sources. They're also current and represent current scholarship and understanding. Limitation is they do not come from someone who experienced it firsthand. Yeah. They are based on primary sources, but they were not pulled directly. There are not going to be any videos, for example, of interviews with people who are enslaved. Everything is going to be a summary and explanation of other primary sources, okay? But another value of a secondary source is that it's easier to understand, yeah? That's more the content than the origin. Still worth mentioning, okay? I have another website here, same topic, the Transatlantic Slave Trade. Here is my website, United Nations, okay? Slave trade. Okay, so what do we notice about the origin? Who wrote this? Well, it's on the United Nations website. It's from this organization here, International Decade for People of African Descent. Let's see, about. Okay, I could look more into that. But just looking at the site, I know that it's from the United Nations. Does the United Nations have values or limitations? Well, the United Nations is a respected global organization that represents people from all over the world. I see here, I would say that is a value. It comes from a source that is respected. It comes the International Day of Remembrance and of the Slave Trade, but I don't see an individual author. So one limitation of the origin is it didn't tell me a specific author, or even maybe a group of authors or who was part of writing this. Okay. I also do not see a date, a publication date. Okay. Good to remember. Good to remember. So, values, United Nations, reliable, respected organization. They have a decade that is focused on people of African descent. So I know this comes from an intense focus. I can click my About page here. There are 200 million people identifying themselves as being of African descent. I can read more here about the project. It's going to be observed. Here we go. Yeah, it doesn't say a ton about who is contributing to this work. Okay. I don't have a lot of information about who is involved, although here is a fellowship program. Interesting. I might be able to read a little bit more about the people involved. These look like people who are involved in this program. I could find, but I don't have a specific author that I could learn more about. And I know this is from 2015 to 2024. So I know that this information as part of this website is pretty recent. That's good to know. So, okay, I do have a time range this comes from. Okay, values and limitations. Is this a primary or a secondary source? Primary or secondary? Well, here we have 2015 to 2024. This was made recently. Therefore, it is a secondary source. Okay, therefore, it is a secondary source. Okay, and same thing, secondary source, good information, a coverage of many primary sources. Okay, let's look at one more source just to provide a final bit of details and examples. I found on Newsella a primary source, a rare day-by-day document of life aboard a slave ship. Sorry, I'm going to close this. Okay, so let me come here. Here is the Transatlantic Slave Trade database. It's a collection of data. Okay, so I'm reading about, it's from Emory University, Atlanta. I want to get down to here. So let's see here. Here we go. Still, few records have survived to describe daily life on these ships. That distinguishes a new record, Journal of the Slave Ship Mary, recently acquired by Georgetown University Library in Washington, D.C. It is a logbook or journal with daily entries. It was written by an unidentified assistant of the ship's captain, Nathan Sterry. It is one of only a dozen or so logs that survive from slave ship voyages between Africa and North America. It has already been known, for example, the ship Mary, departed Providence, Rhode Island in late 1795. It arrived in Savannah, Georgia in August 1796. Okay, so let's say I want to look at this primary source here. So who wrote it? When was it created? So I just found out that it was created in 1795, and it was written by an unidentified assistant of the ship's captain. The ship's captain is Nathan Sterry. The assistant is unidentified. Okay, so I have here a source to learn about the transatlantic slave trade, and it is from 1795, written by the assistant to a captain of a slave ship. So is this primary or secondary? This is a primary source. This was written by someone experiencing the period that I am studying. I am studying the transatlantic slave trade, which includes the Middle Passage. This is written by someone who was involved directly in it. Now, it was an assistant to the captain. What skin color would the captain and his assistant have had? Make a guess. They were white. The enslavers, the people involved in shipping, purchasing, capturing as part of the Middle Passage, were white. This is a white captain and a white assistant who wrote this journal. So, okay, I know that it's a primary source and that has its own values, but I also know it was written by the person in power or an assistant to the person in power. It was not written by the African people who were enslaved on this ship. Okay, values. It's a primary source, which means it comes from the time period. That makes it valuable. It's giving me firsthand accounts. What else is valuable? It has daily details of life in the Middle Passage. That's a valuable thing for me to learn. Limitations. This was written by someone in power, not someone suffering. Now, I have not yet read this source, but I'm going to guess that this person couldn't fully write about the details of the people who are suffering because they weren't going through that. So it is definitely biased to the person, the enslaver, the people managing the ship. Another limitation, because it's a primary source, is wowza, that's some old-fashioned handwriting. I need to find someone who has maybe typed it up into text that I can understand more easily. But I'm going to guess, coming from 1795, that this document is going to have some language that's old-fashioned and maybe a little bit less known to me. I need to make sure I fully understand all the words and what they mean. Does that mean it's bad? No, it's just a little bit of a limitation, a little bit of a disadvantage for me, one that I can overcome, but I want to keep in mind that I want to make sure that I understand everything it says. Let's think. Anything else that I've missed? Those are the main values and limitations. Limitations. It's only one ship in 1795. I don't know about ships in 1850. Well, there technically weren't supposed to be, but there were ships going to other parts of the world. I don't know about ships in 1820. I don't know about ships in 1620. I only know about this one ship. So it's going to be a more narrow view. But because it is a primary source, I'm going to get the day-to-day details. So it's narrow, but it includes a lot of depth and detail. Okay, so we have both values and limitations of that origin. So hopefully this was a good example for you and a good lesson for you on the values, evaluating the values and limitations of a source, we want to think of 3 key questions. Who wrote it? When was it written? Does that make it a primary or secondary source? And then from those questions, ask yourself, what are the benefits of my answers to those questions? And what are the disadvantages of my answers to those questions? All right. Hope that helps.